This episode of iPad Pros is sponsored by Agenda 19. Learn more at www.agenda.com. Welcome to iPad Pros, the show all about using your iPad to be productive and get work done. I'm Tim Chaten, host of the show. Well, welcome to episode 200 of iPad Pros. This is a very special episode, and for this episode, I am actually going to be the guest of my own podcast. I invited Devon Dundee of the Magic Rays of Light podcast and Mac Stories on to interview me about my experiences so far with the MacPad I created out of an M1 MacBook Air and using this headless MacBook Air as an input device for multiple iPads and the Apple Vision Pro, and starting to dabble with the Mac for a few little things, but still mainly being all in on iPad and the Apple Vision Pro as my main operating systems, and just using this headless MacBook Air as a great input device, as we'll talk about, for multiple iPads at the same time, which is something you can't do with the Magic Keyboard for iPad. So this is going to be a really fun episode, I think, and I hope you enjoy it. If you have questions about this crazy little hardware thing that I've rigged up that were not addressed in this episode, feel free to reach out at iPadProsPodcast@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to cover them in future episodes of the podcast. If you want to support the podcast, the best thing to do is go out and download Agenda 19 today from the App Store. Agenda was just updated to version 19, and there's a lot of goodies in it, which I'll be sharing some of later on in this episode. You can also get early access to iPad Pros and Vision Pros by heading over to patreon.com/iPadPros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. My thanks to everyone that supports the show. And with that, here's my discussion with Devon, all about the MacPad. Enjoy.
Welcome to iPad Pros, episode 200. I am not Tim Chaten. Might be a voice that you don't recognize. My name is Devon Dundee. Tim's asked me on the show this week to interview him about his MacPad experiment. So, Tim, welcome to your own show.
Thank you. This is bizarre. I normally play host, so I'll do my best not to step on your toes trying to, this is a fun experience because, most of the time I'm trying to lead the boat, and I'm excited to be interrogated by you on this episode for episode 200. For episode 100, we had Federico Fetici on, and this one is very much inspired by his mad work, as we'll talk about.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of unrelated question first, Tim. Are you a game show fan?
Depends on the game show. It's been a while, but I do love a good game show.
What this episode's giving me vibes of is like back in the day when Alex Trebek would host Wheel of Fortune on April Fool's Day.
I've never seen those. I should go back and watch some.
Oh, old school, man. I can't look away from Wheel of Fortune when it's on. I just have to play along.
Yeah. Before we dive into the main episode, I'm just curious, iPadOS 18, this is like one of the first episodes after our initial reactions. Do you have any thoughts before we dive into you interviewing me?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So I haven't spent a ton of time with iPadOS 18 yet. I did just sacrifice my iPad mini to the beta and installed it. I really wanted to play around with Control Center first.
Yeah.
Which, it's very cool. It's a little buggy the way things kind of reflow and don't necessarily select what you want to yet, but it's awesome. Just the concept so far. I'm really excited about that. Honestly, it's kind of silly, but I'm excited about the calculator. Yeah. I do a lot of math on my iPad and been doing that in Spotlight and various other means for a long time. So having a dedicated calculator is going to be awesome. So that's what I've tried so far. I haven't had a chance to play with it too much.
Do you see yourself using Math Notes as a part of your day job?
Math Notes, I'm not sure yet. Most of my math's pretty simple, but there are moments when I'm like doing a quick budget maybe without having to pull out a spreadsheet. I could maybe use Quick Notes. I could maybe use Math Notes.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Okay.
What about you? What's sticking out to you about iPadOS 18
I'm just glad we have the customization from iPhone because I'm enjoying just the look of everything. And I'd encourage everyone to take a look at the widgets. Apple I don't know if these are all new to iPadOS 18. But there's a lot of new widgets I've never seen from Apple before in there. So take a look in there.
Ooh. Okay. Yeah, I haven't checked the widget view yet. I've been mostly playing with all the different things in Control Center. I'm excited to see that continue to expand as well. The final thing I'll say...
I have played with the handwriting improvement thing. That's pretty cool. I need to play more with that, but you do need to toggle it on. So in the pencil kit, there's an option to like improve your handwriting or something like that. So make sure you toggle that on, because at first you're like, this doesn't seem to be doing much, and you know it wasn't doing anything.
Interesting that they're making that opt-in, even though it's one of the bigger features for iPad this year. I wonder if that'll change sometime throughout the beta.
Yeah, maybe. I'll be curious to see if that improves it all over the beta cycle as well.
The final thing I'll say on iPadOS 18 is they've integrated reminders into Calendar, and I immediately turned that off. That stressed me out way too much seeing them combined.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I like the fact that you could, like, in Calendar, if you hit the plus button, you have the option, let me create a reminder or a calendar event. I don't know. But, yeah, I don't have full feelings on that quite yet.
Yeah, well, we're just at the very first steps of the beta process. We'll see how it changes, and I'm sure as things go along, things will be adjusted ever so slightly as we get closer and closer to fall. All right, you ready to talk MacPad?
Let's do it.
Very cool. I'm interested to hear about your experience with this. Of course, Federico Vitici at Mac Stories is the one who started this whole thing, started modding his MacBook Air, turned it into a hybrid iPad Mac experiment. But for those who haven't been following along with Mac Stories and his adventures, what exactly is the MacPad?
So the MacPad, for those that have not seen this, it's the idea of, first off, you take off the laptop screen from a MacBook of some sort. Federico did it with his M2 MacBook Air, which had a perfectly good working screen on his. Mine did not, as we'll talk about. But you could also do this with higher-end MacBooks. It'd be kind of wild to turn a 16-inch or 14-inch MacBook, Pro into this. Would be interesting. But I do like what I did with the M1 MacBook Air. But so it's the idea of basically making a slab of a Mac. So you just take the bottom half of a Mac laptop, turning it onto a little slab, and having a mounting system for your iPad. So Federico shared in his story about this very strong magnet solution, and the magnets kind of fold back underneath the MacPad when not in use. So they don't stick out all the time, only when you need them. And otherwise, they can kind of fold under. And when you need them, they fold out, and you can mount your iPad to the Mac slab, the MacPad, and it very much looks like a laptop in that mode. And there's this amazing shortcut that Federico engineered that you just hit this button, and in a second or two, your Mac or your iPad screen is running Sidecar, and it is pretty glorious. And you can close out a Sidecar and use iPad as an iPad in iPadOS with a trackpad and cursor from that Mac. And it's better than my current Magic Keyboard because I got a function row and a nice big trackpad to work with. And I can, as we'll talk about, universal control over to a second iPad and use the MacPad with two iPads all at once, or three, and so that's the idea of using this chopped up MacBook Air as an input device for your iPad through universal control, or turn it into a Mac itself through Sidecar, or with the Vision Pro, use it as the most perfect input device for the Apple Vision Pro, and you get a Mac along for the ride. So that's the whole idea of what the MacPad actually is.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You get so many benefits out of the Mac by taking something away from it, right? You take the screen off, and put the iPad on top, and all of a sudden it's this really interesting hybrid device. I'm interested to hear how you're using it day to day, but first, what inspired you to make this Mac and iPad hybrid?
So I had not owned a Mac since I still own this Mac, a 2011 11-inch MacBook Air. That's the Mac up until now that I've had. It runs High Sierra, so a little bit older of an OS. So I had not modern Mac to use if I wanted to, do what Federico did of creating one. I didn't have one to do this with. And I should say, with the M1 and later generation, they made a change to the laptop design where they moved the antennas for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth out of the screen assembly and into the bottom half of the laptop. So in prior generations, if you wanted to do this, you would have to take out the antennas and try to stick them into the laptop body. So with the Apple Silicon, this process is much better from that angle of things. But the inspiration came when I discovered on eBay, the site there's a lot of around a $300 M1 MacBook Airs on eBay with busted screens. So I was like, let's see if I can find a pristine bottom half with a busted top half for a good price, and that's what I did. So I found it was like $315 a M1 MacBook Air, and it had a busted screen, but that bottom, it as advertised, perfect. And it's wild that for less money than a 13-inch Magic Keyboard, I can get an entire Mac, Apple Silicon Mac that has great input, and as we'll talk about, this would be a great alternative to a Mac Mini if someone just wants to buy this instead of a Mac Mini. This is just one aspect of where this gets fun. So cost was the inspiration, and the fact that Apple just released these new iPads, and it's like, I could just get this and skip out on the Magic Keyboards for iPad and just use this instead.
That is a really interesting kind of value proposition, that you could either buy the keyboard and the trackpad for the iPad, or you could get both with the M1 processor and then a whole computer attached. That's pretty amazing that the prices on those are so low, but I guess the consideration is if the screen's busted, a lot of people don't know how to modify it in a way that it can work. And with the MacPad, that's actually a feature, not a bug.
And it's an expensive repair. I looked in what does it cost to repair these laptop screens? It's it's like $400 or something. They're not cheap.
Wow.
The actual materials for those screen, it's an expensive repair.
So you said an M1 MacBook Air on eBay, but just for the details of your MacPad, what are the exact breakdown of the different hardware that you're using?
So mine's an M1 MacBook Air, the base specs in Space Gray. So 256 gigabytes of storage. It's missing that one GPU processor from that chip, and it's got the 8 gigs of RAM, and so that's the Mac component. And I was looking, it's very hard to find broken non-base. It seems like baseline computers get busted up more than the ones people spec out. There might be a care component with people taking better care of the... So at some point, if I ever do an upgrade to this, I would really love more storage, because as we'll talk about, it'd be fun to install a Mac game from the Mac App Store now that it's getting some of those AAA games, but you need 100 gigabytes of free storage to just install stuff, and that's just a non-starter with 256 gigabytes that gets taken up by iCloud Drive and all that other messages, all that stuff. So it is the baseline. And then alongside that, I have paired my M1 12.9-inch iPad Pro in silver with cellular. It's got 1 terabyte of storage and double the RAM at 16 gigabytes. So my iPad has got more good processing stuff than the Mac. And I'm using the Apple Smart Folio with it in green that I got on eBay for $20, which is... So if you are an owner of iPad Pros that aren't the latest and greatest, those Smart Folios are dirt cheap now to find. I think you just picked one up on Amazon, right?
I just got one from Best Buy, actually.
Best Buy,
yeah, they're marked way down, and it came with a ton of free trials to a bunch of Apple services, so I actually kind of made money on it.
I love that, yeah. And then and then I've got the 3 magnets attached to the Smart Folio, which remains uncut. So basically, the way I mount this is the Smart Folio has the magnets on the bottom, which is if you're basically the volume buttons are downwards, and if I had the M4 iPad Pro, the camera would be at the very bottom near the keyboard, because the way the Smart Folio turns over, that's the way to leave it uncut and more usable as an iPad. that's the better way to do it. And I so infrequently use that webcam, it would not be a problem once I did this with an M4, I think, to have the camera pointed all the way down there, because I so rarely use it. And if I needed to do a quick, video call, just take it off and use it that way. And then on order is an 11-inch M4 iPad Pro in space black with cellular, 1 terabyte of storage, and nano texture. So anywhere from June 25th to August 4th, it should arrive. So I'm very excited.
What a range.
Yeah. So a long delivery range from Amazon here. But the nano texture has quite the back order here. But I want to get a smaller iPad to add to the mix with the MacPad because I miss small iPads. I have a 10.5-inch iPad Pro that will not receive the next OS update. And I thought, 7 to 8 years after that thing was released, I think it's time for me to upgrade to that now, no longer supported iPad. So, and I'm excited for the nano texture and using that iPad more on the go, outside, in a variety of conditions. And I think that'll be kind of a cool thing to have alongside my M1, which I think is still a great iPad to keep in use.
Yeah, that's another interesting aspect of this setup that I hadn't considered before. It's not only modular in the sense that you can take the iPad on and off, but it's also modular in the sense that you can change the screen out based on the conditions that you're using the device in. So if you need that nano texture, you can swap that in. But if you need the bigger screen, then you've got your M1 iPad that you can also swap in. So that's a really cool aspect.
Yeah, it's one keyboard you buy versus, in the old days, let's buy 2 keyboards to do this. I was talking to somebody on a episode that's coming out after this one, but in the old days, the first and second generation iPad Pro with the old smart connector, you could actually use the big keyboard with the small iPad. It would not, look great when you close it up, but you could use that keyboard in a pinch.
That's funny. I've never even thought to try something like that. Yeah. I will say, as you're replacing that 10.5 inch, that is a sad day that it's losing software support this year. That was my first iPad Pro back in the day. It really got me started on using the iPad for productivity. So I have a lot of nostalgia and love for that thing, and hopefully it'll find a life in your computing outside of the MacPad at least.
Yeah, I think I'm not selling it because that is my favorite home button to iPad, like the super thin side bezels. It's just it's in gold. I've got the whole assembly with the leather sleeve that the Apple Pencil fits into. It's just, and I may use that leather sleeve with the M4. I'm curious to see how that'll fit. But I love that 10.5 inch, and it's so sad it's getting discontinued. The 7th generation iPad standard has an A10 processor and is still supported. This has an A10X. It is not supported. It has, I think, more RAM than the one. Like, it's very bizarre why they're cutting off support, because there is an iPad with a lesser chip and lesser RAM that is getting support. So, kind of bizarre how they're deprecating this one.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. It's a sad day. We'll take a moment of silence for the 10.5 inch iPad Pro.
For sure.
So I'm curious, you ordered this M1 MacBook Air from eBay. It's got a busted screen on it. How do you go from that to the MacPad? What's that whole process like to set it up?
Yeah, so I watched a few videos to get a sense of what the screen removal process was like. And during that whole process, I followed the iFixit guide pretty closely. I purchased this magnetic pad from Amazon so screws wouldn't be rolling around. And I purchased this MacBook Air repair set at Amazon, which in one of the reviews mentioned, oh, this was a great set because I did this thing where I made a headless MacBook Air out of it. And and I was starting to do my disassembly, and it was missing 2 screwdrivers. So maybe the M2 MacBook Air had different requirements. So I then went to Walmart and got the last bit of screws I needed. And from watching the M2 videos, I really think the M1 modification is a lot easier as far as doing it. They both looked similar enough, but I didn't have any shields to deal with, and it seemed much more streamlined as far as doing this actual repair. And then my MacBook Air, the screen was it was totally busted. Like nothing displayed on it at all. It wasn't like you have a crack through it and the screen still kind of works. It just didn't work at all. So something to definitely do is do all your software preliminary work while the screen, even busted, is there, because you can enter clamshell mode. Can't enter clamshell mode once you take the screen off.
Oh. Yeah, I'm trying to picture like taking the screen once you've detached it and trying to like line up the magnets on
right.
the casing just to get it into clamshell mode. But so basically, clamshell mode, what that allows you to do is hook it up to an external monitor and have that be your main monitor.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah. And otherwise, there's no way to pick the main monitor, and it defaults to the broken screen, which through VNC you can see. So VNC is the magic trick to get that all. So get VNC through screens set up prior, and then you can fix anything basically, which is a very important thing to do. So that's like number one, get VNC up and running, and then you can interact with that screen properly to go into system settings and move that menu bar over to the proper monitor to have that display as monitor, the primary monitor. That's the main thing, is making sure that primary monitor is not the busted screen that is no longer there.
Okay, so that's one good troubleshooting tip for setting up, kind of save people some issues. Were there any other issues that you ran into getting it set up?
After I plugged everything back in, it did not boot. It was very scary. I hit the power button, like everything appears to be in place. I plugged it into my Thunderbolt dock, booted right away. Very happy camper. I unplugged it, totally fine. I restarted it, shut it down, can power back up. It's working great now. I just had a scary moment where didn't want to boot for whatever reason, and now it's fine. So that was a scary moment for sure.
Yeah, those are the worst, when you've done something that you know could break your device and you hit that button and nothing happens. It's like, oh no, is this the end?
Mm-hmm.
Did I just waste this $300? But I'm glad that you plugged it in and it's been acting normally since then. Probably just needed that little boost after being taken apart.
Yeah, that was
a
scary moment. Yeah.
So that's setup process. Now let's talk about actually using it. What is your typical daily process of starting it up and using it and switching between the OSs?
Yeah, so the MacPad, as Federico calls it, it's pretty much just always powered on. And part of that is with the keyboard attached, it might just boot up, in your bag because you hit a key, and the back's very eager to boot up, it appears. Like, I think it needs to hit the Touch ID button to power back on. But it kind of feels like if I hit just the keyboard in general, it turns on. So it's on all the time pretty much, which has not been an issue. Like, it's just kind of there, ready and waiting. It's not chugging through battery when it's on, and it sleeps really nicely and as expected. And I can even connect the iPad to it at the lock screen a lot of the time. Sometimes I'll need to unlock it with the Touch ID. But most of the time, I can just, connect the iPad or Apple Vision Pro to it with it completely locked and be at the, login screen. But if it's not working for a reason, I just hit the Touch ID button and locks it, and I'm in. The kind of fallback is I have screens in my iPad dock and on my Apple Vision Pro, and that's like, is always there as like a way to just like, let's get in there and connect to the Mac in that way to kick it back into the shape. And from there's a menu bar icon for screen sharing. I use a tool called Better Display, but there's also, I think, a system-wide. Yeah, there's the screen mirroring system-wide menu bar thing that's in there. And I can just hit a button for the iPad or the Apple Vision Pro as a way to just manually, within the Mac OS, to just like take it over, and that's been working really well as kind of a fallback to get into it.
Do you find yourself using that fallback often, or is it usually pretty much ready to go when you turn it on?
Maybe once a week I need to resort to that. And then there's the whole thing when traveling. It's a bit of a different situation where Sidecar and Universal Control, it really likes to be on the same Wi-Fi network to talk and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've been told this is not a requirement, but I'm still encountering some weird things when on the go, which, I'm most time at home working or at a known place, so that's normally not an issue. But in my bag, I do have an HDMI capture card. They're super tiny now. It basically feels like a cable with a little tiny dongle on it. So I can just plug that in, and once I do that, I can from the either use it that way or from there just hit the button to connect a Sidecar, and Universal Control will work at that point and all that good stuff. So that's a kind of another fallback. And I have on order the little router that Federico mentioned in his article that you hook up your iPhone to it, and that provides a tethering solution to a known Wi-Fi, and that'll be, I think, the most easy way to be doing this on the go and working with that. And then another kind of thing I did mention earlier was the tool an app called Magnet for the Mac, and that's a really good tool to cycle through windows that are on that hidden Mac display. So that's been a nice troubleshooting tool if I open up system preferences and it's not showing on the right window. That can allow me to fix things.
Yeah. So you got your kind of backup plans just in case anything goes wrong, but for the most part, it's pretty smooth.
Most part I don't even need to use Sidecar. I can just have my iPad there and mouse over to it from the MacPad, either mounted or unmounted, and Universal Control will just be working without me even doing much of anything. It's pretty seamless in that way. And Apple Vision Pro especially. Apple Vision Pro, you don't have to worry about primary monitors, secondary monitors, because it just takes everything over, and that's just perfect. It never has any issues with that. It's just kind of flawless.
Yeah, that has to be a really cool experience, just having the keyboard and trackpad all in one piece in your lap, and then just the screen just appearing in front of you and you being able to manipulate it that way. And of course, also use your Vision OS apps with that keyboard and trackpad as well. Yeah, I mean, the form factor, I think it's I like it more than a laptop. It's a laptop, it's got this permanently mounted screen to it. I mean, we're iPad people because we like yanking screens off of things. But it's really nice sitting on your recliner and having the keyboard and trackpad there for Vision Pro. But also, you're at the kitchen table, you can have the iPad kind of separate from the screen a bit and control the iPad in that way, where it's kind of maybe you're mainly there to watch a video or something for lunch, and you just have the MacPad to the side where you can hit the volume button and the spacebar for play pause, kind of separate out from that, which you can't really do with the Magic Keyboard for iPad. It's kind of your keyboard's in front of you, and don't spill your drink on it. Yeah, the keyboard's useless once you detach the iPad, and that's not the case at all with this. This episode is sponsored by Agenda, which recently rolled out version 19. In this quick break, I want to share a little bit about Agenda and one of my favorite new features in Agenda 19. Agenda, if you haven't tried it out, is a great note-taking app that really thoughtfully integrates your calendar and reminders into your notes. If you have a meeting coming up, you can use an agenda note to prepare for that meeting and have all the information related to that meeting on hand. If there is a way iPadOS supports inputting data, Agenda integrates with all of those in really thoughtful and well-done ways. This includes support for iPadOS 18's auto-refine handwriting feature, so now your handwritten notes in Agenda, if you are running the betas of iPadOS 18, will look even more legible. Agenda notes also support images and file attachments. I was, during the Apple keynote, for example, throwing in tons of screenshots from the video to have at the ready for my discussion with Matt on Vision Pros. So whether it be pictures, document scans, text extraction scans, or file attachments, Agenda supports it all. I love the organization system in Agenda. You can divide out the main aspects of your life or job, and from those main categories, create different projects for everything you are working on. And with Agenda 19, you can filter out your library or search criteria based on this organization. Agenda is one of the best apps on iPad
period, for supporting and working with multiple windows. Every note you have has a little button at the bottom that opens that note in a brand new window via Stage Manager. Or if you're working in split screen, it works great there too, bringing up a focused view of the note like Apple Mail does when you compose a new email. From there, you can move that agenda note into split view if you prefer. You can also open any project or category in its own separate window. The windowing system on iPad is super well designed, and I encourage everyone to give it a shot if you haven't already. Your notes, unlike a task manager, have a few different states that is all conveyed through a single radio button. Filled in yellow indicates your task is on the agenda, or it is top of mind and shown in a special on the agenda view, letting you view everything important in your life from all your projects in one place. A simple tap on the radio button lets you take it off the agenda or mark it as done if it is a note that has a completion state you want to indicate. If you've ever tried using a task manager to take notes or were frustrated by that experience, give Agenda a try. It's the note-taking app that can actually help you stay on track with work and personal projects. Agenda 19 just launched, and the team at Agenda really focused on the search experience, making sure you can find exactly what you were looking for. I'll be sharing more in the coming episodes just how powerful the new search features are. Beyond just basic keyword searching, you can filter both a search inquiry, but your entire library based on the note's due date, note status, note's color, filtering out certain categories, and even filtering to show you notes that were edited today, this week, or this month. This filtering is very powerful, allowing you to browse your entire library with those filters in place as you navigate the entirety of Agenda. If you haven't tried Agenda, I'd really encourage you to give it a try. Agenda is free to download and use with no obtrusive ads. To unlock the full power of Agenda, give Agenda Premium a shot. One thing that Agenda continues to do that I love is their approach to premium features and unlocks. If you ever decide to cancel your Agenda Premium subscription, you get to keep all the Agenda Premium features available when you were a subscriber, or you can opt for their lifetime unlock, which unlocks the full power of Agenda on all of your Apple devices with a single one-time purchase. To learn more, go to agenda.com. Download Agenda 19 today for free from the App Store. My thanks again to Agenda for sponsoring this episode of iPad Pros. Learn more at www.agenda.com.
I'm curious what it's like day-to-day switching between the two OSs, because that's really the benefit of the MacPad when it's with iPadOS and macOS, is being able to switch between them. So what is that like? Is it easy switching? Do you do it often?
Yeah, I do it a fair bit, and that's been a lot of fun. Like, I'm using the iPad more because of the MacPad, oddly enough. Like, I had been neglecting it a bit with the Apple Vision Pro and all that, but so in my iPad dock, I have a couple different icons to the far right. I've got the screens icon, and I also have the sidecar icon. And the sidecar icon's the one I use most of the time, where I just hit this button, and in a second, it'll launch up Continuity Sidecar, and that iPad screen becomes the Mac. And from there, I can, swipe over for slide over to access iPad apps in that way, or I can just I can force quit the Continuity Sidecar app, and then I just mouse over to the iPad. And then I got Universal Control up and running with the keyboard, and I'm using that iPad. If I want to go back to the Mac, I just hit the little dock icon, and I'm back in the Mac. And it takes it's literally like a second between OSs. Like, it's very fluid. You can copy and paste between the OSs with the Universal Clipboard, which is nice. All the function keys work in iPadOS, so I don't have the fancy new Magic Keyboard. But the MacBook has all the function keys, so play, pause, brightness, all that stuff. It works. I have an escape key. All that stuff works in iPadOS and the Vision Pro as well. So that's been pretty neat as well.
Very cool. I'm curious what the balance is between macOS and iPadOS is for you now. Do you find yourself using macOS more now than you used to, since you've got this newer one instead of the 2011?
Right. Another thing I want to mention, it's super nice using picture-in-picture from like an iPad app while in the Mac, and having that whole thing where you're using both at the same time. That's been fun and pretty nifty.
and having stuff come out of the Mac speakers and the iPad speakers at the same time, like, is pretty cool. Like I can have, a podcast or a video playing on YouTube while still having my music play from the other OS is kind of a fun thing.
Oh.
The other cool thing is like everything's on USB-C now. So as I'm charging one device, this one's good to go. I can just plug into the other one, and that's been kind of a just nice thing about all this being on the same power thing. But as far as the balance, it's much different now because my 2011 MacBook Air running High Sierra, the only thing I did with that computer was rip the occasional CD to iTunes Match, and that was it. Because it was very slow, and iCloud wasn't really fully supported between everything at that point, and it's kind of it's a lovely little machine, but not very useful anymore. I'm exploring the Mac world after like 10 years of not using a Mac, which is wild. A lot of my licenses do not have upgrade pricing because I missed out on the iteration between version 2 and 4. Like Audio Hijack, I had version 2, but they're now at 4, so I had to buy a new license for that. Stuff like that. Devon think I'm able to upgrade at upgrade pricing, so it's kind of interesting getting back and like where are the apps I used to use and what version are they at now. And but Audio Hijack's the big one. I still love that I can record podcasts from the iPad with my Zoom H6. But it's really nice doing the audio hijack method. I understand why people enjoy this way of recording. It's actually pretty cool and pretty nice. And I'm still I'm using my Zoom H6 now as a backup of my own audio. So before, I'd fly by the seat of my pants, and if the Zoom, this has happened before, I think with you actually on one of our episodes, my SD card ran out of memory on my Zoom, and I noticed like 5 minutes after it ran out, and it's like, oh crap, we gotta let me offload this and let's start back up. So now with Audio Hijack, I've got Audio Hijack, and if this app crashes, I've got the Zoom as a backup. So that's a really nice change from a podcasting workflow, is using Audio Hijack. So as far as like the mix though, I'd say I'm mostly still on iPad because turns out I really like iPadOS, and the Vision Pro's in this mix as well, but I prefer those two OSs to the Mac. On the everything feels like really tiny on the Mac. Like I really like just like split screen multitasking is just such. It's cozy. Like I like just like working in that way. And the apps that I love are on the iPad, and occasionally it is nice for podcasting to have the Mac set up, but most of the time I am doing the iPad thing. And then I guess the big difference is I am like just playing around and exploring what the Mac is these days because it's been a long time. The Mac I use more so in the Apple Vision Pro environment because it fills a lot of software gaps there. Like there's no Find My app for Apple Vision Pro. So I can just like open that as a full screen app to like keep an eye on, as my wife, 10 minutes from home or an hour from home to know when I need to wrap things up. So it's a nice filling that software gap on Apple Vision Pro through the Mac. And you can now in Vision OS 2 use the Mac Virtual Display in a fully immersive mode. So I can be watching a movie in Apple TV in fully immersive mode and have on the ceiling of my Mac. And I can, what I've done is in that mode, I'll like change the Mac resolution to 960 by like 540. So it's a blown up like messages app. So if I'm like, I don't need to leave my fully immersive mode every time I need to reply to a text message. Instead, I can just glance up at this huge blown up resolution window of messages and work with it in that way. So it's been great for Vision OS especially. But yes, I'd say mainly iPad and Apple Vision Pro, and then the Mac is kind of like experimentation and Audio Hijack. And I did buy a license to Rapid Weaver, my favorite website creation tool. It's kind of like iWeb Pro. If you remember iWeb back in the day, it's kind of like that, but a pro version. And then, so I've been playing around with different just Mac apps. And then, for example, there's no PlayStation Remote Play app for Apple Vision Pro. And even if there was, the Wi-Fi chip on the Apple Vision Pro, not as good as the Mac one. So I've been using the Remote Play app for Mac. That's been phenomenal, using that with the Apple Vision Pro. Go full screen. If you plug in the DualSense to the Mac, you get full haptics. So it's really like having a huge... I'm curious what ultra-wide will feel like with PS5 Remote Play. But so there's a lot of these software holes that are able to be filled on the Mac for Apple Vision Pro especially.
Yeah, that's one conversation that comes up a lot with the Apple Vision Pro is that Mac compatibility and how it just it's a release valve for a lot of software pressure on it, that if there's something you can't do on Vision Pro, you can usually do it pretty easily on the Mac. But then when the Mac is the input for the Apple Vision Pro as well, I mean, it's just right there at all times. Like there's no even friction of getting it going. And I love the tidbit that you pointed out about it being available in immersive environments, because that is so distracting when you're trying to be immersed in something and you get a text message that you need to respond to. You got to go out and then start the experience again. And just being able to have it there, that's a really interesting addition. I need to look into doing that on my Vision Pro just with my Mac.
Yeah, especially with the Disney Plus app. Because if you leave an immersive mode of the Disney Plus app, you have to go all the way back to the immersive picker in Disney Plus, then back to your video. Like Disney Plus, I wish they would integrate that into the video player. I'm not sure if you've experienced that or not, where it's like if you leave the immersive mode in Disney Plus, it's like a whole process to get back in it.
Yeah, I have run into that. I love the Disney Theater setting in Disney Plus app, but I almost never use it because I always start playback from the TV app, and it just completely bypasses that option. And there's no way to do it from the player like there is in Apple TV. So yeah, that's that's just one little quibble with Disney Plus.
Yeah, one nice thing, the environments are in every video player in visionOS 2, so you can be in Mount Hood in Disney Plus now with the full reflections.
Oh.
But
okay,
Disney Plus needs to behave themselves and stop having the black bars encoded into the videos, because it's very distracting at Mount Hood having the black bars up and below. The Disney environments are nice and dark to hide and obfuscate that, but like it's so annoying that they do that.
Yeah, I thought they were just doing that with animation with the Bad Batch, but then they did it with the Acolyte too, and I'm like, what are you doing?
So aggravating. Like, come on, guys. But yeah, as far as input, it's great with the Apple Vision Pro, especially having the backlights be super bright in this MacPad. Because at night, even during the daytime, like the cameras on the Apple Vision Pro, the fidelity of it is not amazing for if I'm using Apple's just desktop accessories. They're kind of like, if you look at just the Magic Keyboard for Mac, it's a very faded out kind of like lettering there. Mm-hmm. So that backlight, I can actually look at the keys and see them, daytime and pitch black at night.
Yeah, I do struggle with that as well, trying to figure out what key I'm looking at on the Apple Magic keyboard in my Apple Vision Pro. So when you're going to accomplish a task, you've got macOS available, you've got iPadOS available, and visionOS available. How do you decide which of those platforms to use for a particular task?
So sometimes is the app available there, like audio editing for podcasts. Fairrate is the only tool I ever want to use, and it's not on the Mac. I did buy Fission to do as part of a bundle with Audio Hijack, and that can do some like audio exporting and some editing, but I'll probably just use that for some transcoding stuff. But it really depends, is the tool there? And these days I'm mostly editing in Apple Vision Pro for podcasts, because I really enjoy that big screen experience for editing. It's an iPad app still. It's side-loaded onto my Vision Pro. It's not even available in the App Store. I'm not sure if Canis would cringe at that thought. Probably he would, but it runs great there. And then it just depends as far as, like right now, doing everything on the Mac with for this podcast because it just makes sense there, and it's nice that things sync. So, like either Agenda or Apple Notes, I can have that up on the Mac and just look at it there. But yeah, as far as deciding what I'm doing where, most of the time it's going to be on the iPad if I'm in MacPad mode, unless I'm doing a uniquely Mac thing, I would say. I'd say Safari could be an area where the Mac is better at times. So depending on what I'm doing there, like if I'm working on a project in maybe a family member uses Squarespace, I might help them, and I might really want to use the Mac for that because Squarespace really not great on iPad still. So stuff like that. I'd say, yeah, it's just a matter of like, am I at the desktop downstairs with the big monitor? Maybe it makes sense to use the Mac in that mode. But otherwise, iPad and the Apple Vision Pro mainly. And then it's been fun using my older iPad Pro alongside my big iPad Pro because Universal Control works across two iPads. So the other day I was at the kitchen table and I had two iPads out, and I had the second iPad, the 10.5, just out for it's my like iPod. It's going to only have full screen music, and I think I had Ivory up as well on split screen, and I could just mouse over to that and control the music and hit play, pause, change the volume with the keyboard, and then on the iPad I had my Safari and Agenda up to prep for an interview, and I was able to finally. I've been ever since Universal Control was announced for Mac, I've been dreaming of a day where I could just have two iPads open and use both of them with the same input, and now I can, and it's really great to be able to that trackpad and keyboard for two iPads at the same time. Like, it's something I've dreamed of doing for many years, and it's a really cool thing because we don't have multi-monitors on iPad. Well, we do now, but we can't do two iPads at the same time, and now we can. And it's really fun. You can copy and paste between the two iPads with the Universal Clipboard, and that's been just a really cool experience to do that as well.
Yeah, the idea of iPad to iPad Universal Control has always fascinated me, and I've done the same thing as you with a Mac in the middle that you may or may not even be using, but it works as the bridge. But with your setup, the Mac is also just invisible. So like, you really can just ignore that it's there if you want to.
Yeah, and the slab thing, it's so nice not having the screen to just like, it's kind of annoying to have just a screen that like, especially with like a little toddler running around, she comes up and like grabs the Mac back. It's like less stress to just have this little slab, and just so much more natural of a thing to not have when I don't need it, because with the Apple Vision Pro and the iPad, I already have screens, and it's so much better in that way.
Yeah.
The other thing that's cool is Sidecar has some touch components. So when I'm in MacPad mode and I'm using the Mac and macOS with the iPad mounted to it, I can go up and pinch in on a photo or Apple Maps, and it works. It's a touchscreen, and I think the pencil works in many apps. I'm still kind of figuring out where it works because it's not universally supported, but in some instances, it works as expected, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that natural tendency that we all have to reach out and touch our MacBook screens, but actually you get the satisfaction of it doing something now, which that's very cool. And also, too, one thing Federico's talked about is having the first OLED MacBook Pro, which now you're going to have access to when you get that 11-inch into as well. So,
I mean, Federico, I don't believe, has nano texture, so I may have the first nano textured MacBook, as they say.
Very cool.
Yeah.
My solution has always been when I need to get out to macOS, which I do often. I run my site on Squarespace, and so I do need the Mac version of Safari every once in a while for something on there. I've got screens installed on my iPad, and I've got tail scale to remote into my home Mac if I need to.
Oh, nice. Yeah. What are your Macs in your life? Like, you have a work Mac and you also have a personal Mac. What do you have?
Yes. So at home, I've got an M1 iMac in silver.
Oh, very
nice.
So it's silver,
it's very
though.
pretty. Yeah, I know. I went with the boring color choice, but
I know.
I wanted it to blend in kind of anywhere in the house.
Yeah.
So it's very nice. It's very pretty, and it mostly sits unused. Unfortunately, it's very underloved.
Yeah.
But I do use it once in a while for editing my website, and then at work, I use a bunch of Macs at work because I work in a sound booth. So, but my main one is an M1 Pro MacBook Pro that's in my office.
Okay.
And either of those at any time I can remote into from my iPad, and that's often how I do my Mac stuff, is just with remote access that way. So as far as the MacPad goes, what's the benefit of having a MacPad over just remoting into a Mac?
Yeah, I mean, the remote experience is way different, right? Because you can't plug ports. You can't plug a thing into your USB-C port on your iPad and have that show up on the Mac. That would be a cool feature if Screens wants to look into USB accessories through BNC. I don't know if anyone does that, but that would be nifty. But that's the thing, because one thing I'll do for in the podcast workflow is I'll record my voiceover for the opening and exit of the podcast most of the time after I'm done editing the show. So I edit the show, and then, let me, record my voiceover. And in the past, I would, grab my microphone, plug it into my iPhone, and look at the iPhone through the Apple Vision Pro camera, and then AirDrop it up. But now it's kind of nice just like plugging into the Mac, and it's in the regular Apple Vision Pro display, and I can then send it over to the Apple Vision Pro for editing. So having a totally native solution is nice from that regard. You can also, when you play back audio, speakers work. That's great. The other thing is Sidecar. It looks much better than VNC. Like it's 4:3, and you don't need to like go into the Mac settings and let me try to change the aspect ratio system wide to make it work on the iPad. It just naturally it fits the screen perfectly for that. And when I get the 11-inch, which is a slightly different aspect ratio, it'll be perfectly formatted for that screen. So that's like a very nice benefit there. It's the Apple solution, so it's like the best way to access a Mac, I think.
Yeah, and I have to imagine that latency is probably a lot better that way too.
Oh yeah, it feels like there isn't
Sidecar
any most of the time.
Yeah. Well, I've never actually like gone in and adjusted my max resolution to make it fit my iPad. Maybe I should try that as just like a little sample of what having a MacPad is like.
Yeah, I've done that
actually
before.
filling the
It's kind of
screen.
fun.
Yeah. That I imagine that has to be a better experience than the black bars that apparently you and I both have a vendetta against in a lot of areas.
Yes. Have you done much with Sidecar with your MacBook Pro at work? I don't know if iCloud's probably an issue, right, where you're not logged into the right account.
I actually am
okay.
logged into my iCloud account there, so that works. I haven't tried it with the MacBook Pro. I tried it a while back. I made a very good decision at one point and bought the very last Intel MacBook Air before the transition.
Yeah.
And that thing, it was so slow. I tried using Sidecar with that, and I think it kind of just spoiled the whole experience for me, and I haven't tried it since then. So I need to give it a try with Apple Silicon. I'm sure it's much, much better. I don't know. Usually when it's time for me to use the Mac, I want to get it done as quickly as possible. So I remote in, do what I need to do, and remote out.
Yeah.
I need to give
funny.
Sidecar another try.
Our family bought Macs the year before M1s came out. And so I convinced my wife to sell her Intel MacBook Pro to get the MacBook Air. And it was a good, value still in that computer. So I feel very good about doing that trade when we did, because those Intel Macs did not age well.
Yeah, the trade-in value went way down with Apple Silicon for sure. But of course, with your MacPad, you still got the iPad as the screen. It's still a fully functioning iPad. You can do iPad things with it. Do you find yourself ripping it off a lot and using it just as a tablet?
Yeah. The cool thing is, like, before I didn't really use the Smart Folio ever. I had like a Folio and I never put it on it because it was always in the Magic Keyboard. And I would take it off the Magic Keyboard occasionally to use it naked, but I find the Smart Folio is actually really nice. Like I like the fuzziness on the back. That's kind of nice, and propping it up as a stand to just have it, there. So I am using it quite a bit away from the keyboard now in ways I didn't before. And it's nice just having that as like an iPad where I wasn't doing that very much prior. It was always in that laptop mode with the Magic Keyboard. And I expect when the 11-inch comes in, that'll just go even more to like 11, where I'm, pardon the pun, 11-inch. But the smaller size, I think I'll be using a bunch more just as a tablet, which I didn't before. And it is a lot of fun because you're being able to use the iPad with the keyboard and trackpad where it's not even mounted, where you're working at a table, and it's much more fluid even there of not even needing to unmount it. You're just like, let me grab the iPad and start using iPadOS fully touch, and then hit Sidecar, and I'm back in Sidecar. And so it is I am using it much more as an iPad with Apple Pencil, and yeah, that's been a thing for sure.
Yeah, it feels like you're really just getting like the maximum value out of every piece of this setup. You're pushing it all to as far as you can, and really just taking advantage of each form factor as it comes, which is very cool, and honestly something that I don't do as good a job with my iPad Pro, which basically lives in the Magic Keyboard. You mentioned before that I did just buy one of the Smart Folios. It just came in today, and I wrote a blog post with the software keyboard for the first time in forever. Is actually kind of fun. So yeah, I think that opening yourself up to using it as a tablet more is another great side effect of not having that Magic Keyboard, and really being able to just use it for whatever is best for the use case that you're in.
For sure. Yeah. And yeah, the iPad turns out it's really great without a keyboard still. Like,
yeah, something to try. So can you plug the Mac up to an external monitor and use it standalone as well?
Yeah. And that's really great. It's changed my desk setup because before I had the desktop accessories from Apple, the short version of the Magic Keyboard and the Magic Trackpad too. And when the Apple Vision Pro came out, I actually bought a second Magic Trackpad because I wanted to have one downstairs and one upstairs with my Apple Vision Pro. And now I don't need any of that. I just have an empty desk, and I come down when I want to work here, and I plug it in with the Thunderbolt cable to my Thunderbolt dock, and connects right away to the external display with the webcam attached to it, and that works really, really well. And in this setup, you can also... So M1 Macs are limited to one external display, right? But Sidecar will work with an external display, so you can, with an M1 MacPad, use a big external display and your iPad display in Mac OS mode as Sidecar. Or what I've been doing more often is the iPad is on its hoverbar Duo running iPadOS, and I can universal control over to that and use iPad apps in that way. And the Mac becomes, it's basically like it turns into a little Mac Mini almost, where it's like, because I mean it's really nice having the Mac within this little slab of this like Mac slab, it's kind of
slab.
The little Mac slab, as I call it, yeah. But it's kind of bizarre because like my old setup with the desktop accessories, I put them in this big like plastic like tray to hold them all nicely together, and it was so much thicker and more cumbersome than this little tiny slab is. Like it kind of just blows my mind, almost daily that this whole Mac computer is inside here too. Like, it's very nice.
Yeah, that's very cool. It's almost better than a Mac Mini in the sense that you don't have to buy a keyboard and mouse or trackpad, as long as you don't need the USB 2 ports, I guess, which you could buy a dock for that. And then you just got it all in one piece. And yeah, I love to keep my desk clean, so I love the concept of just having it in one piece.
The Thunderbolt Hub has really been a game changer. I have this really nice one from OWC, and I used that mainly with the iPad prior, and when I plugged in, everything's along for the ride, and that'll work with the iPad as well if I want to use the iPad with this external monitor, and I've got the webcam with the iPad as well now. But just plugging in a single cable and using either the Mac in this mode, or if I wanted to use the iPad in this mode, I actually could plug I haven't done this yet, but I could plug my iPad into the external monitor and use universal control on the MacPad, not connected to anything, and do it that way too, which I have not tried yet, but that would be another setup option if I want to plug stuff into the iPad and just use the Mac in this mode as external input. And I'm using the Sony Endzone M9 monitor, the same one that Matt Birchler uses. And I've got a PS5 hooked up to it as well. So it's a nice little setup down here where I can game on the PS5 or use any of my computers with this single monitor. I can't imagine buying an Apple monitor because of their lack of input options. Like, it's very nice having this flexibility to plug in a bunch of stuff to this single monitor.
One thing you mentioned earlier was taking the MacPad with you to go and kind of some of the things you have to work out there. But as far as just carrying it around and keeping it safe as you travel, what accessories are you using for that?
Yeah, so it was a long search. I'll tell you. Bags are really optimized for one laptop and maybe a small iPad to go along with it. So finding one that fit the 13-inch iPad Pro alongside the MacPad was like, it took a while. But I did find a very small bag. It's got a nice padded compartment that I can put either the iPad or the MacPad in. I tend to put the MacPad in there. And then it's got another compartment where it's got a little slot that I can put the iPad in. And it's really nice not having a cut-up Smart Folio because I can just fold it over the screen, so the screen's protected as well in there. And I think when I get my 11-inch, I could probably put the 11-inch in with the MacPad, or I think I could fit all three computers in this bag pretty easily. And then it's got some little pencil holders in this bag, which is nice because I'll end up having two Apple Pencils in there because of the Apple Pencil Pro not working with the older iPads and all that. And then it's got a little zippered compartment where I have my HDMI capture card, and I've got a USB-C plug in there. And if I do more extensive traveling, I put a power brick and stuff in there as well. But yeah, everything fits in there pretty nicely. And then I'll be carrying along that little mobile base station as well for that when I do need it. But yeah, it's a very nice little. I'll put a link in the show notes to this bag I picked out. I do wish there were more options for like just pure sleeves that had multiple compartments for similar sized laptops, but not a ton of options out there from what I've seen.
Well, we just got to get more people using MacPads, and then the demand for that kind of sleeve will be higher, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I do wish like someone made a hard case for the MacPad. Like, it'd be nice to have some way of like having the keys covered so you're not pressing up against them as you're traveling. Because like the Mac doesn't like it when you just like continually like press its keys. Like, it's fine, but it's not as happy that way.
Yeah, it's used to having that top cover to keep everything safe. It's not used to bouncing around like that.
Exactly.
But, you do what you got to do.
You do.
Are there any quirks or recurring issues that you've run into with the MacPad? Anything like managing its battery or keeping them connected, anything like that?
So in the early days, I thought this would be a big issue. I thought I'm never going to get this thing to sleep. It's always going to be hidden stuff. But after the first week, I kind of got into the mode where it's not been an issue. Like, the battery has been very well managed, even in the bag. It's not waking up all the time. Like, the battery life on this thing is incredible, as you know, with the M1 Max, and that is even more so without it powering up a screen. So the Mac's very well juiced up. And the iPad Pro, as I think most iPad people have mourned, that 10 hours is not really 10 hours anymore. I don't know what metrics they're using, but so I do charge that one up a fair bit. And with the MacPad, I'm using the iPad more than I did prior. I don't know if it's more just fun using it in this manner. I think it is, and that's probably causing me to use the iPad more than I had in the past. Because I was using the iPad quite a bit. It was my primary computer until the Apple Vision Pro came out. But yeah, the Apple Vision Pro stole a lot of its thunder for usage. You might, I have 24 hours in a day, and Apple Vision Pro is eating up more computing time. And now with the MacPad, I'm definitely using the iPad more than in the past because it is just a fun way of using a computer, I must say. And yeah.
So all told, with everything that you've talked about with the MacPad, your experience with it, using it with the Vision Pro, is this something that you recommend other people try?
Yes, I'd say so. So in a couple other just kind of little notes I must just share. Notifications can be an odd thing if you're using the Mac OS side of things. Because you'll get like a messages notification, the Mac will get it too. So that's been like just a weird quirk I've noticed, like just handling, messages coming in has just been interesting. And then I also just want to comment that, so Federico initially went with the 11-inch because it was a bit unwieldy for him with the heavy 12.9. I've been very impressed with just how stable and how unafraid I am of it coming off. Like, it's a heavy device, but it's very stable. Like, I'm not sure if you ever tried to put a Magic Keyboard with iPad on like a bed or a couch and just toppling over.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't topple over with this setup. Like, it's more stable. I don't know. The base is probably heavier. That's probably helping. The magnets are super strong, but it's a more stable laptop than what the Magic Keyboard for iPad has been up until now. So that's been pretty impressive. And I'm not sure if that's any different with the M2 and M3 Airs. The wedge form factor has been an interesting just thing, because I think it works pretty well in this form factor of it being a bit thicker at that end. But as far as doing this yourself, yeah, I'd really encourage people to hit up eBay or go to local like computer shops and see, do you have any busted laptops you want to sell me, kind of thing. And yeah, if you can find something in that like $300 range, the value is wild. Like, even $500, that's what you pay for a Mac Mini these days. Like, so like I think there's a lot of value, especially at $300 to do this. Just, make sure the computer is not iCloud locked, and it can take a bit of searching to find the right one. I was kind of sad I couldn't find a gold M1 MacBook Air because I've always had an affinity for gold computers. But those are out there. So if you want to, track down a gold, MacBook Air, they're out there. And then I'm very happy with the price I paid, but the storage, you may want to expand how you use the Mac with this and use it more than you might have thought. And if you're able to find a bust up Mac with 512 or a terabyte, that may benefit you for sure. But with my limited Mac use, the 256 has been completely fine because it's mainly acting as like an input, right, for the iPad and Apple Vision Pro. And I'm doing audio hijack and some stuff. But yeah, it's a weird dichotomy where my Apple Vision Pro and iPads have 1 terabyte of storage and 16 gigs of RAM, and the Mac's the wimpy one of the bunch. But yeah, I'd really encourage, take a look at Federico's article to see what he did and how he did it. Yeah, if you're like an iPad guy, it's a lot of fun. Universal Control is just an amazing kind of feature that Apple pulled off. And what they did here, like being able to use multiple iPads. Like when the 11-inch comes in, I'm very excited to try out 3 iPads. I got my big iPad in the middle and the 2 ones next to it, and have it like a just iPad command central of using all 3 at the same time. I think could be a lot of fun. But yeah, eBay is your friend, and go out and search and see what you find.
Yeah, I'm sure you can find some good deals out there. The $300 for this setup sounds amazing. But do you think that this is something that Apple should actually offer officially? And if so, what do you think it would look like?
Should they? Yes. Will they? Probably not, sadly. Like, I think like how interesting it would have been for them to create something like this. Like, they could sell this as a desktop computer, really, without the iPad stuff at all. And that would be an interesting product, even without the other stuff. Like, it's a desktop computer, a mobile desktop computer that, works with the Vision Pro. That would be a cool thing. Even without an official mounting or hinge solution for Apple for iPad, that'd be cool. If they did create this, it would be awesome to not have the problem of, a ghost broken display that you'll never use that sometimes Windows get hidden in. So that would be nice to be rid of. If Apple did this, I would just salivate at what hinge they could create to mount an iPad more integrated than this is, and have some way of, when I disconnect the iPad, automatically go in the iPad mode. When I connect it, automatically go in the Mac mode, and potentially the Mac knowing, oh, I'm using Agenda on the Mac. When I disconnect it, throw up Agenda on the iPad, kind of thing, and have some kind of handoff in that way would be really neat. If Apple could figure that out, and have, maybe if Apple did this, they could have a little hardware switch to turn off keyboard input when I'm not using it, kind of thing. That could be a lot of fun. Yeah, I'd imagine if Apple did this, it would be a lot more than $300. It'd probably be at least the cost of a Mac Mini, because that's what you're getting, but in a different form factor there. Yeah, and with the Apple Vision Pro, it's a no-brainer to have something like this. Like, I think a lot of people could benefit from this kind of device. The other thing that Apple could do better is the webcam situation. There's no way to use the iPad's webcam when you're in Sidecar. That could for sure be enabled. Even with iPads, I think that could be a thing that they decide to do one day. But, it's great that the iPad can use webcams natively as well with USB-C. But, the webcam story is interesting because there's the iPhone continuity thing. So you could, when you're in Mac mode, you could actually put an iPhone above your iPad and use that feature, which is kind of nifty. Yeah, I would love for Apple to create something like this and more elegant than this. But I've been just overall impressed using this for the past month or so, month and a half. Just how it feels like this was meant to be, almost like, Sidecar works so well, and Universal Control just works brilliantly, and the Vision Pro connection also works just like. I'm excited to bring this with me to Thanksgiving. I'm going to California this year, and excited to show this to some of my brothers that they're Windows, and there's Windows people, but I think they'd appreciate what this is.
Yeah, I love the concept of what Apple would do if they offered something like this. Like you said, there's just so many different ways it could go. If there was one for the Vision Pro just as an input there, I would buy that in a second, because that would be absolutely incredible. But also just, of course, the constant conversation about a hybrid iPad macOS device having some way to get that macOS functionality on your iPad when you need it. That's something that's constantly going to be a conversation, and maybe one day Apple will have a solution for it.
Yeah, it's interesting because iPadOS, this was the big year for they're going to improve multitasking, but that just didn't happen. Probably the AI stuff detracted them a little bit. But yeah, iPadOS has been on a TikTok cycle where, 2 years ago we got Stage Manager. The year after they cleaned Stage Manager up, and it's been on that cycle for a while. And this year, they kind of didn't improve the way you work on iPad unless you're a pencil user. So, iPadOS 19, hopefully we're back on track with the big updates. And has anything about this concept and what Federico and I have talked about tempted you to take a look at eBay and create one for yourself as as an iPad and Apple Vision Pro user, this seems like it could be up your alley.
Yeah, this is definitely tempting. I'd say the part that worries me the most would be the actual physically taking the display off, having that moment of does this turn on or not. I think that would scare me. But yeah, this just hearing you talk about the benefits of it, not only as just a hybrid iPadOS, macOS device, but also as an input for Vision OS, as an independent Mac when you hook it up to an external display. And the way also it's just kind of pushing you to get the most out of your iPad as well. This is definitely tempting. I have not taken the step so far of going on eBay and checking to see what's available, but I think I might have to set up a save search and see if I can get a good deal on an M1 MacBook Air. Probably not a gold one because I don't want to make you jealous, but I'll keep an eye out and see what's out there.
Yeah. I've never had Space Gray before. I'm enjoying the color here. But yeah, with Magic Rays of Light that you do, I can imagine it being super handy to have like on the ceiling a little notepad in a fully immersive space while you're do you take notes when you're watching some of your shows so you're like more ready for the podcast? Is that a thing?
I do. Most of my watching for the podcast though is done on the TV because usually it's in a shared environment, so I have my phone just to take notes, not to be checking social media or whatever. But yeah, I haven't. I don't think I've done any note taking while watching anything on Apple Vision Pro, but I guess I just have to not be in an immersive environment for that right now.
But yeah, go out and search eBay, everyone listening, because it's a lot of fun, and the disassembly really was pretty straightforward and not too difficult, not too scary at all with the M1. Just make sure you have the right tools, and yeah, and thankfully it's a broken screen anyways, so it's like
low risk.
Low risk, yes.
Very cool. Well, this has been a fun interview, Tim. I appreciate you letting me come on and quiz you all about the MacPad and learn more about it. I know I've learned a lot. I think listeners have too. And who knows, you might be getting some messages from people who decide to emulate your setup before long.
Yeah, I think this could be a thing. Yeah, I think like Federico did the thing where he already had a, perfectly good working MacBook. And that would be a decision to make. I mean, you can always put the screen back on. I think the enticement is much more so when it's like, oh, it's like a $300 broken laptop that you're bringing new life into. Kind of.
Yeah, very different calculus there. Risk reward is definitely a lot. Risk reward is definitely a lot different when you're buying a used one that's already broken for sure. Well, Tim, this is your show, so I think people know where to find you, but that's how we wrap up interviews on podcasts.
That
so where do people find you?
Yeah, you can find me at my podcast, iPad Pros, iPadPros.net. I also do a Apple Vision Pro show. You probably know I do that as well. Vision Pros at visionpros.fm. And that releases the weeks opposite from iPad Pro. So there's now a podcast every single week from me about the iPad or the Vision Pro now, which I've been liking that kind of cadence of there's something every week from me, which is kind of fun, which is a new thing since the Vision Pro launched in February. So that's been fun.
Yeah, you kind of doubled your workload there, but also people get to hear from you every week, which is very cool. I like Vision Pros a lot. It's cool to hear the different perspectives of users and developers and people who are just exploring this whole new world of spatial computing. Very interesting field, and enjoy those conversations every week. So I definitely recommend people check that out as well.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, the Vision Pro feels like a iPad for your face almost with the iPad apps you can run in there. Like it's very shared DNA there a little bit.
Well, as for me, you can find my work at Mac Stories. We've mentioned Federico several times. What we didn't mention is that he's also my boss. I write for him over at Mac Stories and do some proofreading stuff over there. I've also got Magic Rays of Light, which is a podcast I do at Mac Stories, all about Apple TV and the world of Apple TV and Apple Originals. I do that alongside my buddy Sigmund Judge. So check that out. I'm also on Mastodon and Threads at Devon Dundee if you want to check me out there. But with all that said, Tim, thanks again for having me. Let me interview you. It's been a fun chat.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And if you want to look into even more crazy iPad modifications, check out what Sigmund's done with his Apple TV Go. It's got a story. Yes. Mac Stories all about that.
Yes.
I should invite Sigmund on to chat about that modification, because that's another iPad thing going wild.
Oh yeah, once you enter the world of hardware modification with iPads, there's a lot you can do. It's a fun world.
Thanks, Devon. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim.
Well, that's my discussion with Devon all about the MacPad. My thanks to Devon for his time interviewing me, and my thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. You can follow me as well on Mastodon at tchaten@mastodon.world. If you are interested in reaching out about the MacPad, you can also email me at iPadProsPodcast@gmail.com. My thanks again to Agenda for sponsoring episode 200 of iPad Pros. Learn more at www.agenda.com and download Agenda 19 today for free from the App Store. My thanks again to Agenda for sponsoring this episode. And with that, I'll talk to everyone again real soon.